Hello again, everybody. We're going to call this show UM Goats Overtime. In the past week, you've seen the launch of our series UM Goats with a pair of interview segments with former Miami coach Jimmy Johnson. And I hope you guys enjoyed those. And we're very excited about this new brand of content that we're bringing you on canesport.com. During the course of producing those programs, Roy Firestone also interviewed former Dallas Cowboys quarterback Troy Aikman, who, by the way, was once almost a Miami Hurricane. And he spoke extensively to Troy about Coach Johnson and the inner workings of their relationship and just the different nuances of playing for Jimmy Johnson. We only were able to use a small portion of it in the UM Goats episodes that you watched on Jimmy, but we thought that you might enjoy watching the entire interview in its entirety with Troy Aikman. So here it is today. This is UM Goats Overtime and Troy Aikman.
My old pal, Pro Football Hall of Famer and ESPN broadcaster, Troy Aikman, is going to join us. Troy is now in his 21st season as a football analyst with Joe Buck. This after, of course, a brilliant 12-year career with the Dallas Cowboys when he helped the Cowboys win 3 Super Bowls. Much of today's interview has to do with Troy and Jimmy Johnson, his former coach, and now one of Troy's best friends. It wasn't always so. In fact, for many years, Troy and Jimmy had a sometimes tense relationship. So we talked to Troy about the fascinating and complicated Jim Johnson and how both became very emotional on the day that Jimmy was tapped to go to the Hall of Fame in a surprise.
All of a sudden, cut to the live shot at the game, and you could see the tears coming down Troy's face.
What was special about this one was not just that it was on national TV, but that there were other guys there that could feel that they were a part of it. I think the surprise worked exactly like we'd hoped it would, maybe better than we'd hoped it would.
Talk about that day. Talk about your emotions and why you were as moved as he was.
That particular day, that game anyway, we were closing in on halftime, and my producer got in my ear, and he's done this from time to time. He just said, "Hey, can you stick around and watch the halftime show? They're doing something. I'm not even sure what, but they want you to see it." And I thought, okay, there's something they're doing about the game, and then we're going to come off of it and probably get into it maybe in the second half. So it's not totally unusual. And then, so I was watching it like the rest of America. And I guess, why I got so emotional, really, Roy, was one, because I knew how much it meant to Jimmy. Mm-hmm. And then 2, the way he reacted. It was so authentic for his reaction. And you could just see the emotion that he was feeling. And knowing how much he's meant to my career is why I was as emotional about it as he was.
Before we talk about why, because it took a while, it was not a right away love affair between you and Coach. We'll get to that in a moment. Right. I'm going to read you back one of your own quotes that you mentioned earlier in this conversation. You said, "Jimmy has never been appreciated in Dallas for what he accomplished. He's a revered figure here in Dallas, but he's never been thanked. He's never stood on the field and or a podium and had the fans show him how much they appreciate him." Let's talk about that in more detail.
Yeah, they finally got to when he went back to Dallas and got his Hall of Fame ring this past fall. So that was the first time. And he celebrated that moment along with Drew Pearson and Cliff Harris. So it still wasn't as though it was just his moment. But it was the first time that he actually was down there on the 50-yard line and was recognized and honored by the fans. And I just feel that the way that it ended between he and Jerry, and there's been a lot of stuff written about it, and we all have talked about it for so long, but he left when we won our second Super Bowl in '93. No one imagined when that game ended that would be the last time Jimmy Johnson would coach the Dallas Cowboys, but yet that's the way it happened. So then he exited and really has not been in Dallas much. Hasn't been to football games or anything like that. So for the fans to be able to recognize him for all that he meant to those teams is significant. It meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to all of my teammates that were there that night. Certainly meant a lot to Jimmy.
He tried to recruit you at Oak State. In fact, he was the first coach who ever walked into your house, any coach. He was the very first coach coming out of Henrietta High School. He didn't get you. He tried to recruit you to the University of Miami for the Hurricanes. Couldn't get you. Then he got you in Dallas as the #1 draft pick. But right away at 1-15, you guys were pretty bad. And then it took about 3 years for the two of you to really love and trust each other personally and professionally.
Yeah, I had known Jimmy since I was probably about 14 or 15 years old. He was recruiting me at a very young age as a sophomore in Henrietta, Oklahoma. And as you said, Roy, the first night that a head coach can come to visit a recruit's home, Jimmy was at my home in Henrietta. I was their #1 recruit coming out of high school in 1984. And I really felt that entire senior season of mine that I was going to go to Oklahoma State. And then I visited Oklahoma and decided, hey, I wanted to be a part of a team that had a chance to win a national championship, which we did. And then when I was transferring, I originally was from California. So it wasn't because of Jimmy. If Jimmy had been in California, I probably would have, maybe gone with him wherever he was. But I was just more familiar with California than I was Florida. So I went to UCLA. And then when I came to Dallas and he took over as Jerry bought the team, everything was good. And then in the supplemental draft, they drafted Steve Walsh, who was his quarterback in college.
In Miami.
At Miami. So I think that dynamic created a little bit of tension right from the start. It was hard for me to understand as the overall #1 pick. Why then are we using another first-round pick on another quarterback? And then there's this existing relationship, having won a national championship together and spent obviously the previous 4 years together. So Jimmy had said that, well, the way he tried to deal with it was just distance himself from both of us. And I think Jimmy would agree, in hindsight, probably not the best thing, certainly for our relationship as a rookie quarterback and trying to navigate the waters of the NFL, and Jimmy trying to do that as well. And then the losing on top of everything didn't help. My play wasn't particularly great. So there was a lot going on there that created this tension between he and I, and it took some time before we were able to work through it, because there were other layers to it as we moved through other seasons. But when we finally were able to address it and get kind of that behind us and start moving forward, I think Jimmy maybe underestimated my how hot I run and how competitive I am. I certainly never questioned how important it was to him, but the relationship, because of how it began, Roy, and because of the history going back to, as I said, when I was 14, 15 years old, it's one of the relationships that I'm most proud of. I love Jimmy. I love what he meant to my career. And I'm thankful and grateful that he and I have been able to remain great friends. And I will tell you, the biggest honor that I've ever received, yes, going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame was tremendous for me. But when he asked me to induct him into the Pro Football Hall of Fame and be his presenter, that's as high a praise as you can give somebody. And for that to happen to me, with everyone who knew what our relationship was like when it began, was quite an upset, to put it mildly.
You said of Jimmy once, he lives each day like he's living the last day of his life, but he's still a complicated guy. There's still a small circle of people he even lets in. He's protective of his territory, but he's also awesome, fun, and generous once you are on the inside. He's so complicated, so brilliant, but his edges are a little softer and rounded than before. I enjoy that so much about him. I've never been more proud of any friendship than mine with Jimmy.
Yeah. I think what I've admired about Jimmy is, at a relatively young age, he knew what made him happy. And it wasn't about money. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about celebrity. It was none of those things, because he could have made a lot more money being a GM for any number of teams in the National Football League. But what made him happy was fishing and living there in South Florida, in the Florida Keys. And So he got out of coaching when he could have still continued to do it. And he's living his life and really enjoying each and every moment. And he's not, I go see him frequently. As I said, I'm going to see him this weekend, but he's not the same guy that I played for. He was a very complicated, driven individual, maniacal in his desire to win and prove, because at that time, a college coach hadn't enjoyed success in the NFL. And he was determined to show that he could do it and prove that he could do it. And he did. I think he looks back and he's proud of the two boys that he's raised and how well they're doing and what he's accomplished and his relationship with his wife, Rhonda. And it is a small circle that he lets in. But when he lets you in, he's as loyal as the day is long. And it is a relationship that I'm most proud of.
You said once that Jimmy has built or had built when he was a coach an alter ego, a bad guy. He wanted to be the mean bad guy because it was a kind of created persona, but off the field he would eventually change. Talk about why he had to build that bad guy alter ego.
I think Jimmy felt in order to be a successful coach that, he had to be the bad guy or the tough guy and put fear in his players. And he certainly did that. Now, because I've gotten to see him away from coaching, and he really does just want to enjoy each and every moment. I mean, there's not a guy on the planet who's enjoying life more than Jimmy. And when he talks about his coaching days, he says, I just had to play that role in order to get the most out of those teams. And there's a part of me, Roy, that believes that it was just a role he was playing. But I'll tell you what, sometimes I question it because he was so good at it that it could not have just been acting. I just think that when he was coaching and in his profession, he was so determined that, he was a guy who ran on a lot of emotion. And I don't think, some of it you try to create a little bit of a drama in order to motivate a team, but I think most of it was very authentic. And now that he's away from that arena, I think we now see the guy who the coaches and his close friends got to see even during those coaching days when he wasn't on the field. But I never was around him much away from the field. So that's now I think he might be a little competitive when he goes out there and tries to catch fish each morning when he's out there fishing, but that's probably about it.
One of the turning points in your relationship, and as we said, there was some tension. You weren't starting after game 17 in the playoffs after he said you would. He wouldn't let you. You wanted to go into his office and said, "This is BS. I don't want this anymore." You were angry. But you had an incident where you had just beaten the Giants and they're having a celebration of Roger Staubach on the field. And somehow you stood next to Jimmy on the sideline and you said, "Coach, someday you and I are going to have a celebration in a limousine waving to the fans if after a championship," or something like that.
Right.
And it really moved Jimmy. It kind of brought him more attention to you and a little closer to the two of you.
Yeah, it was a turning point in our relationship. We had a tough 1991 season. I'd gotten hurt late in the year. Berline came in. Steve Berline took my place, took us to the playoffs. And so now we go into the 92 season, and there's still a little bit of a rub between Jimmy and I because of some things that happened that previous year. And during the preseason game, you're right. At halftime, we'd come out a little bit early. Those players from the 70s were still driving around, Coach Landry, Roger Staubach in these convertibles. And Jimmy just happened to be nearby me on the sidelines. And I don't know why I said it, but because I hadn't really talked to him all that much, but I just said, "Hey, Coach, one of these days, that's going to be you and I going around celebrating a Super Bowl win." And he kind of looked at me quizzically and then walked away. He didn't even comment about it at the time. And it wasn't until week 2, Roy, we were on a flight back from New York and heading back after a win. So we began the season 2-0, and we're flying back to Dallas. We're about halfway into the flight, and Jimmy comes walking back to the plane And he'd had a few Heinekens under his belt by the time he got back there. But he stopped me and he says, he says, what you said to me, and now at this time, it's about 3 or 4 weeks earlier that it had happened.
Wow.
He said, when you said that to me about one of these days, it's going to be you and I celebrating a Super Bowl. He said, you don't know how much that means to me. And from that moment on, now we won too. We won a Super Bowl that season is the way it unfolded. So, but really from that moment on, our relationship was in repair, and it just got better and better and better.
Tell me how a fish tank how it made a difference for you, Troy. And by the way, you still have fish tanks?
I don't, and nor does he. He doesn't either.
Oh, really? He stopped with the fish tanks, huh?
Yeah, he's got a big fish tank right off the back of his house that he gets to take his boat out of there.
Tell the folks how a fish tank also got you closer.
Yeah, we were in the middle of that 92 season, and we'd lost a tough Monday night game to Washington, and Jimmy was pretty upset, and we were still a pretty good team. We had that was just our third loss of the year. I think we were about 10 or 11-3 at that time after that loss. And so we were still feeling pretty good about our team. And yeah, it was a difficult loss, but Jimmy came back again on the flight back to Dallas and was pretty upset. He really wanted to clinch the division that night against Joe Gibbs in Washington on national television. And so he started ripping into players and didn't like that anyone was even talking and he really offended a lot of my teammates and alienated them. And then the next night was our team Christmas party. And all the players said, we're not going. And I said, well, I have to go. I'm the quarterback of the team. There's no way I can not go to the Christmas party. So I go, and there was not many players, if any others, that were there. And Jimmy came over and we were talking, and one thing led to another. And we started talking about fish tanks. And I said, I've always wanted an aquarium. I've just never had one. And I'd always wanted an aquarium. And so this conversation ensued, but that was it. And it wasn't until the following week we're at practice, and Jimmy came up to me at practice on a Friday and said, hey, how about after practice, we go get you a fish tank and put it together. And I said, how do you tell the head coach no? I just said, okay, that'd be great. And we went and picked one up, and he actually built my fish tank. And then throughout the entire 93 season, which was a year later, he would occasionally call me on a Tuesday, our day off, and say, hey, I'm just in the area. I just wanted to pop in and just hang out and check out your fish tank. And I'd say, okay. And so it went from, Roy, our relationship really did go from a coach-player relationship, even while he was still my head coach, to, he was still obviously the authority and my head coach, but there was a friendship that had developed. And so when he was leaving, no one wanted to see him leave, and no one wanted to see him leave more than I didn't want to see him go. So there's so many layers to our relationship as to why I'm so proud of it. Jimmy, you've been an amazing friend, an amazing coach. I've told you this so many times in the past that whatever I've accomplished and all the dreams that I was able to fulfill as a player are because of your leadership and what you meant to those teams. And I speak for all of my teammates when I say that we thank you. Wish you had stayed longer, but you taught us a lot. You taught us more than you'll ever know. And even in the tough times, you still brought a lot of laughs to all of us when we get together and talk about some of the things that happened behind the scenes. But thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you've meant to me and all you've meant to my teammates. Beautifully said.
Hey, Troy, I appreciate you taking the time, man. It's great to see you again. You've always been one of my favorite people. And as you said, you love the mission statement in Jerry Maguire, as I recall, because you and I we are forever linked in an Academy Award winning motion picture in the same scene, by the way.
Yeah, how about that? That was awesome. That was fun. Yeah, like the memo.
Like the memo. Thank you, Troy. Good to see you. We'll talk to you soon.
You bet, buddy.
Troy Aikman and his interesting relationship with his former coach, Jimmy Johnson.